Today we're going to do a video on how I ferment my feed for my girls. I use Eden Feeds mash. I use a half-gallon glass jar, a wooden spoon, paprika, and apple cider vinegar. The apple cider vinegar must contain the mother, and I use mash because using a mash is going to give you a much better ferment than a pellet will. I also use paprika because paprika does help to add nice golden color to the yolks, and also it will help with the fermentation process. The process itself is super simple. I start with my apple cider vinegar, and I put about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch at the bottom of my jar. The next item I'm going to add is my paprika. I do buy this in bulk, either from Amazon or you can get it from Costco. And I add 1/4 cup to the jar. Next comes the mash. I do 2.5 cups of mash, and that basically is good for feeding about 13 hens. 2, 3, 4.5. And I'm using a 1/2 cup scoop there, so that's why I have so many scoops. The next part you're going to add is going to be your water. And when you are doing your water, you want to make sure that you're using either filtered water or reverse osmosis water. And the reason for this is that tap water does contain either chlorine or chloramine, and both of those will make the process slow down or make the fermentation process not work at all. If you have chlorine in your water, this is something that you're going to have added into tap water because of your municipality, that when they do their processing of your water. The chlorine can sit in a bottle overnight, and then the chlorine will dissipate out of it. However, if your municipality uses chloramine, that will not dissipate out of the water. So that's why I recommend either filtered or RO, because that will take those two items out of the water. When you fill up, after you've got your mash in here, you're going to fill it up to about here. You want a good 4 inches or so above your mash. So I have an RO hookup here, so I'm going to add my liquid here. All right, so once we get to this, I'm going to take my wooden spoon and I'm going to mix it up really well. I want to make sure that all of the paprika is mixed in really well and all of the mash is completely wetted down. Once I have this mixed, you will see that there is a lot of liquid above the mash. The mash is down here. You do have some floaters up here. This does happen, especially if there's some of the seeds are lighter, so they will lift up here, but eventually they will sink down a little bit better because they get waterlogged. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this. I use these really cute little covers that I got from Amazon. They do have little elastic in them, so it makes it a lot more convenient, and I just pop it over the top like this. You can use a cheesecloth, but if you do use a cheesecloth, I do recommend a cheesecloth that doesn't have big holes in it, so it's going to be the real fine cheesecloth, because you don't want dust and other things kind of coming through, but you do want air to be able to circulate through, because as this process happens, it's going to produce gas. So if you close this bottle up really tightly, you might explode it as the gas is building up, which you do not want. And this will at least allow the gas to escape, but because it is a finer weave, it doesn't allow dust or dirt or stuff to get through it. Once I have this like this, I am going to set it into my pantry, and it will sit there for between 3 to 4 days. My pantry is not overly warm, it's dark, and it does a really good job of, keeping this fermenting. If you are going to ferment for a larger amount of birds, then, if you're using a bucket and you're putting it out in your shed or something where it's warmer, you're definitely going to want to check it, and you're not going to want to have it sit for more than maybe 2 days, because in the warm conditions, it's going to ferment quicker, especially, and if you have a very humid condition, you really run the risk of getting mold on there. So the other reason is that when you want all this liquid here is you want to be mixing this at least once a day, because you want to make sure that nothing is really floating on the top, like none of this. Once this absorbs the liquid, it's going to kind of get higher and higher. But you still want to make sure that there's a good amount of liquid, at least an inch of liquid above it once it is absorbed, the liquid that's in here. You can add more liquid if you need to once you have this is absorbed after 24 hours. But I have figured out for the amount that I put in here, what I have in here now will keep it covered. But especially in a humid place, you can develop mold really quickly if anything sits on the top. And I really do not recommend anyone fermenting for more than 2 days in hot, humid conditions, especially if your stuff is sitting outside in a shed. Because my house is climate controlled, I don't have to worry about that. And I also live in a very dry environment, so mold is not, again, a very big issue for me. One of the other things that you need to be sure of is, as you're fermenting, you want to be smelling the ferment. So the ferment itself should smell very acidic. It should not have a moldy blech smell. You have smelled things that are rotting, you know what rotting stuff smells like. So your nose is going to be very good at telling you if your ferment is working right. If you are any concerned about it, don't feed it to your girls and throw it away. But usually you can tell, because by the time after a couple days, it is going to be very sharp and vinegary kind of smelling. This is a bottle that has been in my pantry for 3 days now. And as you can see, the mash has absorbed quite a bit of water and it is really bulked up, but I still do have a good amount of liquid above it. When I open this and I smell it, it is very sharp, and I know that the process is working the way it's supposed to. When you first do mix it together, it will smell somewhat sharp, but it also might have more of an earthy scent to it. And if you don't use, if you decide to use nothing in your ferment, because some people don't use anything, they just put water and the mash in there, it will have a very earthy smell at first, and it won't get quite as vinegary as quickly. I like to put the vinegar in there because, again, it helps things go a little quicker, and I think that it doesn't have as bad of a smell, especially when I put the paprika in it. The paprika does keep it smelling a little bit less earthy, but still you can tell the difference between something that's spoiled and something that's fermenting. But again, when you do see, once after 24 hours, when you're sitting there, you're going to probably see some more stuff floating up here. So you're going to want to definitely mix it. So every day you're going to mix this, and every day you're going to make sure that it is smelling okay and there's no issues with it. Make sure you're using a wooden spoon or a silicone spoon, because metal can affect its acid. Metal and acid, they don't always work great together. So I just don't like to use anything metal if I can avoid it with this mix. And I just make sure that, again, nothing's floating on the top, because if anything's floating on the top of this, it's going to tend to mold just because the air is getting to it. With it being under the water here, the mold isn't going to take up effect as much. It won't. You shouldn't have any mold in your fermentation process in the time frame that you're doing it for, because it is covered. But if you do not have enough water in there and the top of it's sitting out for a couple days, I guarantee you're going to see some mold on there. And if you see any mold on any of this stuff, you want to throw it away. You do not want to feed it to your chickens. And yep, that's how simple it is. It doesn't take very long at all. And in the morning, I drain out the fermented feed for my girls because they don't like really wet, sloppy feed. They eat it during the day. And then at the end of the day, if there's any left over, I just dump out what's in there. And then I give them a new bunch in the morning. I do also let them have, in the afternoons, I do let them have free choice dry mash, which is also made by Eden Feeds. Eden Feeds is awesome. They do sponsor me, but I have been feeding their feed for much longer than they've been sponsoring me because I do feel it is a really good product. It's all natural, it is non-GMO, it's all grown in Montana, and I like to know where my food comes from. And the most benefit bonus of it is that it really is at a really good price point. If you're in the Western United States, you can find it at most Murdoch stores and a lot of the local feed stores. I really recommend it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you will try giving fermented feed a try with your girls.